There are some people that really believe that this roster, while it might lack some of the experience that last year's roster had, some people genuinely believe and are saying it privately that this roster might actually be more talented in certain places than it was a year ago, which is a very scary thought for those that are trying to knock off the defending national champions. Hello and welcome in. It is Always College Football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Today is August 11th, and we are going to dial it up today, ladies and gentlemen. We have a brand new AP poll. We are going to eviscerate the AP poll like we always do. It's so fun. I love it, but it is just a starting point. Everyone that freaks out over preseason polls need to know exactly what they're for. Is to generate conversation. And we will generate conversation today. I can promise you that. We also are going to get into some camp whispers, some buzz that's building in a few different places, quarterback competitions that are ongoing. We'll give you the latest on Ohio State's quarterback competition, on Notre Dame's quarterback competition. Bama's got a quarterback competition. Tennessee's got a quarterback competition. LSU has a quarterback injury. We'll discuss that and some of the positive revelations that have happened here these last couple days in fall camp. We'll get to all of that. So fun day here on Always College Football. Before we get into the AP poll, I just want to encourage everybody, if you can, okay, I'm challenging you, loyal listeners, to Always College Football. If you could go on your podcast platform, go there, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Okay, that goes without saying. All right, if you want our up-to-date episodes and you want them to just be sent to you immediately, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast platform of your choosing. We're on all of them, so it doesn't really matter. But I really need you guys, please, to go on and leave us a rating. Okay, leave us a rating, because if you go back, we were a 5-star show for a very, very long time, over a year, well over a year. And then a certain team got left out of the college football playoff, and all of a sudden our show was exclusively responsible for that, clearly, based on the ratings. As a result, our ratings have plummeted. It's still a good show. Nothing's changed, and we're not on the college football playoff committee. But if you could, help us build those numbers back up, get that number back up to around 5 or 4.5 or 4.8, whatever you guys want to put it at, it's fine. We just need to offset some of those 1-star ratings from a few years ago. So very much appreciate you guys doing that. For those of you that are here with us on the ESPN College Football YouTube page, also appreciate y'all as well. Subscribe to the ESPN College YouTube page. We'll be putting out clips throughout the week. We have several clips that we send out from our shows. So if you don't have time to watch maybe an hour worth of content, you can watch 6 minutes involving your favorite team. So subscribe to that ESPN College Football YouTube page as well. So that's my plea. Appreciate you guys, and tell your friends. We're doing great college football coverage as we ramp up, because we're 12 days away from the season getting kicked off, ladies and gentlemen. We are right there. So a lot to look forward to here over the next couple weeks. But we don't often just rip things to death here. Everyone does their best. And frankly, preseason polls, they're not worth the paper that they're printed on. They're just not, because they change and we're all guessing. And teams that are ranked in the top 10 last year, there's going to be a handful of teams that will fall out of the top 25. It's going to be a handful of teams that are unranked that find their way into the college football playoff conversation. Who had Indiana in the playoff last year? Who had SMU in the playoff last year? Who had Arizona State in the playoff last year? So 1/4 of the playoff field came from the unranked world. Okay, well, I take that back. Maybe SMU was ranked, but I don't recall. We'll just pretend that they weren't for the moment. So for those of you that are not in the top 25, don't panic, because in the 12-team playoff era, the opportunity to elevate is absolutely there. But what are we doing? I mean, seriously, what are we doing with this AP poll? Come on, man. There you go. Texas is number 1. I don't have a huge problem with that. I don't. I think Texas, I have them number 3. So I think they're excellent, right? If you're in the top 3, you're pretty dang good. I don't think I need to explain that to anybody. But what I'm amazed by with this AP poll is that Texas has some real question marks on their roster. I think they're great on defense. I love their weapons. I love their running backs. I love their depth at running back. I love their depth across the board. I think Arch has a chance to have a great year. I'm really excited about what he might do. We'll talk a little bit more about him in a little bit, and how one aspect of his game is really, really changing the way you're going to have to defend Texas's offense this year. But they probably shouldn't be number 1. there's just too many question marks. There's too many things to look at along the offensive line. And that offensive line, by all accounts, is having their hands full going against their defense throughout the course of fall camp so far. So to have them at number one over a team like Penn State, who has everything that you could possibly want. Yes, Penn State is without Tyler Warren, but they have everybody else back. And it sounds like tight end, we'll talk about them here in just a little bit, tight end is not going to be a position of weakness for Penn State this year. It could very well develop into a position of strength with the guys that are coming along at that position here the next couple of weeks. Look, I think to me right now, it's very clear who the top two teams are. And if we're going based off of what we know, things that we have questions about, these two teams have the fewest. Clemson and Penn State. They should both be at 1 or 2. The AP put Clemson at 4, which is better than the coaches. Got to give them some credit for that. The coaches had them all the way down at number 6. But if you really look at both Penn State and Clemson, as far as guys that played roles last year and what their role looks like this year, it should be very obvious that they should be no worse than 1 and 2. I look at Texas. I think Texas, I have them at 3. At 1, it's kind of splitting hairs. I just feel like Clemson at 4 feels way too low, especially with what's back off last year's team. And the fact that on a, quote, down year, they went and gave Texas all they wanted in the first round of the college football playoff and won the ACC. Clemson, gosh, they're sleeping on them. I'm just saying this. I know it's 4. I know it's still pretty good, but that feels a little bit too low for me. Meanwhile, Ohio State. I know Ohio State's going to be crazy talented. I really believe that they have tremendous, tremendous personnel. But if you really look at Ohio State's roster, there are legitimate question marks coming into this year. The quarterback, frankly, is a bit of a question mark. I look at some of the key pieces that were lost defensively. There are some pieces that need to be replaced there on that side of the ball. I think I'm curious to see what's going to happen with their running back rotation, even though I think it's going to be a pretty good group and I like their offensive line. There are legitimate question marks around Ohio State. To have them at 3 ahead of, say, Clemson at 4, to me feels like a bit too much. We're giving a lot of credit to Ryan Day and Ohio State. By all means, they deserve it. But it just feels like it's a little bit too high, at least for me. I look at 5, Georgia, I'm fine with them. I had them at 6. I can live with that. Perfectly fine with them being at 5, 6, splitting hairs right there. Notre Dame, I think they're a little underrated, frankly, coming into the season. I know there's some question marks about the quarterback spot. Them sitting at 6, I'm fine with that. I get it. There are some key pieces, especially on the defensive side, that need to step up at second levels, a couple other spots. I understand that you lose a great safety. I think Notre Dame's going to be really good. I continue to believe in them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that quarterback competition and why it's not as much of a problem as some people might be acting like right now. I think it's going to be just fine. Oregon at 7, perfectly fine with that. I think that's an appropriate place to have them. That's where I've had them, right around there, 7, 8 in that vicinity. I think it's about right with all the new faces that will be filling in, how young that roster is across the board. Bama at 8, to me, a little bit too far down. Questions at quarterback, for sure. We'll talk about that position here in just a little bit. But if you look at the rest of the roster, I think Bama right now, their roster is about as good as anybody that's listed right in front of them. And year 2 with Kalen DeBoer, I think that group has a chance to be much more cohesive. So I feel like they're a little bit too low. I look at LSU, probably about right. I had them at 7. They're at 9. I can live with that, especially if they don't take the strides on defense. I think they're probably going to take. And if they are not as committed to running the football, if the offensive line struggles, whatever the situations may be, I think it's about right to have them their bottom half of the top 10. Miami at 10, that's where I had them. Totally good with that. Arizona State at 11. Perfectly fine with Arizona State sitting there where they're at. I think it makes perfect sense. Illinois, number 12. Now, I look at Illinois, I look at all the pieces that were back. They have so much continuity from last year to this year. So it wouldn't be right for me to say, well, Clemson and Penn State, based on the continuity, should be 1 and 2. And then now I'm being critical of Illinois. No, I think Illinois is appropriately ranked at 12. Now, I have them a little lower on my ranking. But if you look at what's back, if you're going to value returning production, Illinois absolutely deserves to be ranked where they're ranked here at number 12, according to the AP. At number 13, South Carolina. This one is too high for me. Like, I love Lenora Sellers. I think offensively, they're going to be great. I think they're going to run the football really well. I think the receivers have a chance to be much better, but there are so many new faces on defense. There are so many new pieces. And while, yes, Dylan Stewart's still there, the great All-American defensive end, he will take over games. There's no doubt about that. But the other pieces that were lost along the defensive line, how are they going to adequately replace those guys? 13 to me for South Carolina is really high. And I think that team, there's too many question marks right now on defense to feel great about them going into the season. Michigan at 14, about right. That's where I have them. Florida at 15, about right. Got no problem with that. SMU at 16. Clearly, the AP recognizing what Rhett Lashley's got going on, the possible development at quarterback that we might get from Kevin Jennings, but they are ignoring the incredible play that they got at running back last year for Brashard Smith and the amount of pieces that were lost off the defensive front. I think SMU right now at 16 is a little bit too high. I think you can easily make a case for them to be in the top 25, but they're at 16 feels a little bit too high. Kansas State, got no problem with them being ranked where they're at. Oklahoma at 18, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. The AP is just like me. I think this Oklahoma team could be one of the most improved teams from a win-loss standpoint from a year ago. Now, the schedule's brutal. Schedule is absolutely brutal, but if you look at the improvement that they made at quarterback by going out and getting John Mateer, the improvement they made with their offensive identity by going out and getting Ben Arbuckle from Washington State, him bringing his quarterback with him, and assuming they could stay healthy at wide receiver, which they couldn't do a year ago, Oklahoma's going to have a bounce-back season. Really believe that. I think the AP recognizes that as well. I have them a little bit higher, but at 18, it's probably about right. A&M, I also have them a little bit higher as well. I think this is about right, though, for A&M in the top 20. Indiana at 20, perfectly fine with them right there. There are some new pieces, but I do think the additions that they made in the portal have them in a really good spot. Ole Miss at 21, 22 Iowa State, Texas Tech at 23, good with all three of those. Tennessee at 24, Boise at 25. Really, I think the AP poll did a pretty good job. All things considered, in a year when you can really take teams 15 through 35, that's a 20-team gap. There's not that big of a gap, I think, between team 15 and team 35. It's probably as small this year as it's ever been. That's why I told you in the tiers, I think there's 36 teams, the tiers shows from a couple weeks back. I think there's 36 teams that could legitimately make the college football playoff this year. People will say, oh, you're crazy. You're too optimistic. Fair enough. But right now, those teams in that gap, man, it can get pretty interchangeable. And the teams that make the play on third down, the teams that make the goal line stand, the teams that punch it in the red zone, the teams that make their field goals and create turnovers, they could easily fly up, win some games, and find themselves into the top 25, top 15 college football playoff conversation. The teams that got absolutely disrespected across the board, USC. USC right now is in the others receiving votes category. They're actually fifth in the others receiving votes category. So that has them as like the number 30 team in college football. That's the biggest difference between my top 25 and the AP's top 25 is that I have SC at 11. The AP has them at 30. That's a 19 spot gap. SC brings back a quarterback that I think is really well equipped to have a nice year. They have arguably the best weapons in the Big Ten outside of Ohio State. Ohio State's kind of in a league of their own with that conversation, which is understandable. But SC brings those guys back and should be outstanding at wide receiver. And they're going to make huge strides on defense. I am really optimistic with what I saw last year from Dance and Lynn and where they grew and how they progressed and just how much better they likely will be here in year number 2 in that defensive system. Man, they're going to be good. So the fact that they're in the top, they're barely in the top 30 to me is outrageous. This is a top 25 roster, no doubt about it. Now it's just about getting those close wins that they could not get a year ago. How many games did they have the lead in the fourth quarter? How many times did they have the lead in the game only to see that lead evaporate as game goes along? I think they get some of those wins this year. I think they'll be in the college football playoff conversation and would not be surprised that they're one of the dark horses in the Big Ten overall. Another team that I think was pretty disrespected was Baylor, a team that won their final 6 games of the regular season last year after a 2-4 start. In the process, they have a quarterback in Sawyer Robertson emerge. They also have a dynamic running back in Bryson Washington, who's amazing. I hate that they lost Austin Pendergrass, their number 2 running back, because he was really good in protection and a really capable weapon out of the backfield as a pass catcher. But they like their depth at that position. Man, Baylor not in the top 25 to me was surprising, especially with how things finished. I mean, you look at a team like Florida that's ranked 15th, And you look at a team like Baylor, both finished really, really well, and yet Florida's at 15 with a ridiculously difficult schedule. Baylor's at 28, when, frankly, there's a lot of similarities between those two teams. Another team that I felt like absolutely is getting slept on right now is Utah. Utah comes in at 27. They're right behind BYU, so that'll be interesting. So that BYU's at 26, Utah's at 27. Little rivalry there, but Utah brings back one of the best offensive lines in college football. They have upgraded the quarterback position with Devin Dampier coming up from New Mexico, who's going to be great. I think he's going to be great in that system that they're going to run. And defensively, Utah's always going to be rock solid. And in the Big 12, where there's a lot of upward mobility for Utah not being the top 25, when there's a gap between Utah and Kansas State of 9 spots, to me feels a bit aggressive. I love Kansas State this year, but I think Utah to be 9 spots behind a team that I think is very, very close to them, to me feels like a step that's a little bit too far. And then finally, the other team that I feel like is really being slept on is Auburn. If you look at where they were last year, how many games were just flat out given away, just given away, whether it's the Cal game where they threw 5 picks. I think against Arkansas, they threw 5 picks. They had a 4th and short that was stopped by Georgia when they were marching and the process of trying to tie the game. They had just a handful of just really difficult outcomes last year. They have an 11-point lead in the 4th quarter against Oklahoma. They throw a pick 6. They lose that game on the field. Like it just there's no way it can be as snake bit as it was last year. Just the football gods won't allow it. It's not likely. I guess it can happen. Nebraska fans will be like, yeah, well, we've been that way for a while now. We've lost a lot of one-score games. I get it. So I understand that it can happen for sure. But you look at where Auburn had challenges last year. Where did they have challenges? They had challenges at quarterback. And they were inconsistent at wide receiver. They were inconsistent along the offensive line. And then defensively at all 3 levels, they were pretty solid. Okay, the offensive line has been solidified. That group is back mostly intact with a couple of high-profile transfers. You look at the receiver position, they bring in a game breaker in Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. So that group has immediately gone from a middle-tier group in the SEC to one of the top groups in the SEC at the wide receiver spot. And at quarterback, with the challenges they had with turnovers last year, I know Jackson Arnold has his fair share of challenges with turnovers when he was at Oklahoma, but it sounds like those things are kind of a thing of the past. So hopefully they're going to get better quarterback play. They're going to have better weapons. The offensive line should be better. The one position that's not as good as last year is running back, but they have some depth at that position as well. So I look at Auburn, and for them to be 5, 8, 11, 12 spots, so basically 37th in college football, to me is way too far. I think Auburn's got a chance to be a top 25 team. I don't think they're a playoff team. They have a chance to be a top 25 team for sure, especially with the pieces that have improved from last year to this year. So just a little AP poll digestion. Like I said, it's not terrible. It's not the worst. There are some glaring mistakes. There's some legitimate omissions, and there's a lot of gripes to be had from those teams that are not in the top 25. But for the most part, tip your cap to the AP. And reminder, this is a starting point. So if for whatever reason, let's say Texas and Ohio State, they're 1-3 right now. They play week 1. If for whatever reason, one team blows out the other, let's say Ohio State blows out Texas or vice versa, doesn't matter. We need to adjust accordingly. We don't need to just drop a team from 1 to 6 because they lost their week 1 game in convincing fashion. No, if they look poor, let's adjust. Let's penalize teams that don't play well, and let's reward teams that play really well, especially against top-tier competition. So I hope that this is an ever-changing and evolving AP poll this year, as opposed to what we've seen in the past, where, hey, you lose a game, you drop 3 spots. You lose another game, you drop 3 spots. And then you have a team that's 1-3 that's getting votes in the top 25. Like, what are we doing? So let's adjust, and let's be willing to adjust. I think the AP poll, I have faith in the voters. I think they will. Let's now dive into some camp whispers. All right. A lot of buzz, especially after last week. A lot of teams holding their first scrimmage. Let's dive in to some of the conversations that are surrounding some of these college football programs. Let's kick things off with defending national champions who are in the midst of what should be a hotly contested quarterback battle. The quarterback position at Ohio State is always one of the most scrutinized in college football, isn't it? I mean, every year we sit there and we wonder who's going to be the guy. And immediately, the second whoever gets named the starter, their Heisman odds skyrocket, don't they? Isn't that wild when you think about it? But it's not that surprising, especially when taking into account the shoes, the magnitude, and who they play week one. Ohio State will kick things off against the Texas Longhorns, who likely will have one of the best defenses in the country. But right now, the quarterback competition continues to roll along. And if you look and listen to what Ryan Day said, sounds like this is maybe surprising a few people with how things have gone so far. You have Julian Sayin, who's the 5-star, the guy that most people look at and say he's got the highest ceiling in the quarterback competition. Then you have Lincoln Kienholz, who's done everything that you could possibly want him to do up to this point and has been really reliable, has been extremely steady. And on a day-to-day basis, it sounds like his floor has been higher than that of Julian Sayin. Now, Julian, naturally, with his arm talent, has flashed some of that potential. We've seen his ability on the recruiting trail. We've seen what he's done in shorts in the past. And there have been really high points throughout the offseason. There have been high points throughout camp. But when you're relying on a young player like Julian Sayin is in just his second year in college football, you're going to have some ups and downs. The roller coaster is understandable. It happens. But right now, it's very, very interesting. It sounds like Julian Sayin's been able to string together some more consistent performance the last couple of days. But right now, the coaches continue to rave about what they've seen from Lincoln up to this point. We've already known that he's had mobility. He's athletic. He can run. He can move. But it sounds like his ability to push the ball down the field has become really impactful when going against what should be one of the better defenses in the country. So I think that the preparation's been fantastic. And right now, it sounds like it's kind of a big toss-up to see who that guy is going to be. Do you go with the guy that's probably going to have a slightly higher floor in Lincoln Kienholz? Or do you go with the guy with a slightly higher ceiling in Julian Sayin? It'll be really interesting in seeing exactly how that works out. Right now, it's kind of sounding like Kienholz has a real shot to become the guy. We will update things as they go along, but I know Ryan Day, having played that position, knowing that position inside and out, he notices that it's important for them to decide who that starting quarterback is going to be probably sooner than later. And one more takeaway out of Ohio State camp over the last few days, the more people you talk to that have watched them practice, that have actually scouted their roster, whether it's scouts, agents, opposing coaches that have started to study, there are some people that really believe that this roster, while it might lack some of the experience that last year's roster had, some people genuinely believe and are saying it privately that this roster might actually be more talented in certain places than it was a year ago, which is a very scary thought for those that are trying to knock off the defending national champions. One of those teams that is trying to knock off the defending champs, that's the Penn State Nittany Lions. We'll go over now to State College and talk a little bit about what things look like for Penn State. What I've been most excited about is that all we talked about all offseason is how do you replace Tyler Warren? How do you replace a guy that had 100-plus catches at tight end, that was the Mackey Award winner, that ended up being a top draft pick in the NFL? How do you replace a guy that was that unstoppable last year? Remember, I mean, he was getting direct snaps in Wildcat quarterback situations. He was one of the best players. I think he should have been on people's Heisman ballot. He was that versatile and he was that important to what Penn State was trying to attack you with. I've been very concerned about the tight end spot. And frankly, looking at what was a problem spot last year, I've been a little concerned over the last few seasons about the weapons that Penn State will roll out there. Like, how do their wide receivers stack up against some of the best teams in the sport? They obviously don't have a Jeremiah Smith, but I am cautiously optimistic based on things we're hearing coming out of camp. We'll start with the Tyler Warren replacement first and foremost. Sounding more and more like Khalil Dinkins, who was mostly utilized as kind of a blocking tight end last year, but he's always had that physical skill set that was very difficult to defend. He's not as long as Tyler Warren. He's only 6'4", but he's every bit as heavy, and he runs a 4.5 in the 40. So it's sounding like he is really becoming the alpha dog that position group needs. And it's sounding too like he's one of the more underrated players on their entire roster, which to me is really encouraging, especially knowing that is a problem position, knowing what was lost off last year. And they also have a couple of young guys they're really bullish on. But the fact that you have a fifth-year senior who is taking ownership of that position group and is turning heads is a really, really good spot to be. And we've spent a lot of time this offseason with Penn State talking about the upgrades they've made at wide receiver. To be honest with you, I feel like as a whole, their wide receiver core was kind of underrated last year. They were absolutely underutilized. But those guys have now all gone in different directions. And we'll see what happens with, say, Trey Wallace at Ole Miss. I think he's going to have a nice year. But I really like some of the pieces that they've brought in via the transfer portal. And it's sounding like, as a whole, no room on Penn State's roster will be more upgraded than the wide receiver room. That's the buzz that we're hearing right now. The addition of Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, Trevor Pena coming down late from Syracuse, being that big physical possession wide receiver that you love to have there on critical third downs in the Big Ten. Sounds like it's been a massive upgrade. And you know how Penn State's going to try to attack folks. They're going to run the football. We know that. The dynamic 1-2 punch at running back, you know they're going to have one of the better offensive lines in the sport. I'm very optimistic about how they're going to run the football, which means a lot of one-on-one coverage for the aforementioned wide receivers. You're also hearing the name Liam Clifford, who has been a guy that has long been, I think, a solid player. But it sounds like he, in his senior year now, is really coming into his own. And then you want to take it one step further. They have a freshman that you continue to hear really good things about. That's Kobe Howard, who's at 5'11", 197 pounds. He's from Florida, enrolled early. And it sounds like he's a guy that might work his way into the equation. James Franklin's talked about how much he's been a standout and some of the things he might be able to do with the ball in his hands. So a position of concern might actually become a position of strength here for Penn State as they try to chase the elusive national championship. We'll keep it in the Big Ten. And a team that I am really bullish on, and you'll probably understand why here in just a little bit, that's the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And we know when they went out and hired their new offensive coordinator in Dana Holgorsen. Dana Holgorsen is a guy that is rooted in air raid principles. At his core is the Texas Tech Mike Leach system, where they want to spread around the yard and throw it 70 times. Well, as Dana Holgorsen has evolved as a coach and going and becoming the head coach at West Virginia, more and more they started to kind of abandon the traditional air raid, and they became a group that wants to spread you out and run it. That's what they're going to be. That's where they are. And they've now evolved to the point where they're almost more run than they are pass. And so much of our conversation this offseason has centered around the development of Dylan Raiola and how much better he's going to be and how much more confident he's going to be. Well, you know what's going to help him more than just about anything else? A really compelling run game. And it's sounding like the depth they have in the running back room is going to make Nebraska a very difficult team to defend. We know about Emmett Johnson, but Mekhi Nelson's drawing a lot of praise. Isaiah Mosey's drawing a lot of praise. This might develop into an offense that can not just beat you with a young second-year quarterback and an improved group, what I think of wide receivers, but they might be able to just pound you and shrink the game and make it very difficult on the opposing offense because they can limit the possessions. I'm really excited about what I'm hearing. I wanted to hear a commitment to running the football. I wanted to hear growth at the running back room. I wanted to hear about more depth in the running back room. It's sounding like they believe they have one of the best trios in the Big Ten at the running back spot, which is only going to allow this offense to take the next step collectively as they try to have what should be a breakthrough season for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. We'll move down south to talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. And much like Ohio State, who we talked about just a little while ago, Alabama's in the midst of what is a very exciting quarterback battle. And right now, there's three guys in the mix. It's Ty Simpson, who I think at this point has a little bit of a leg up on that of Austin Mack, who's running more than likely most of the time with the twos, does get some reps with the ones, but most of the time Austin Mack is running with the twos, and they're sprinkling in the five-star freshman, Keelan Russell, who continues to grow and get better every single day. I am really optimistic. I went to the Alabama scrimmage this past weekend. I am really optimistic from what I saw from the quarterback spot. Usually, and you kind of read through the tea leaves all over the college football world about how things go in the first scrimmage. And more often than not, the first scrimmage is usually dominated by the defense. That's not uncommon. That is most likely because on defense, all it takes is one guy to win his one-on-one, and that win takes the offense into a possible positive play into a negative play. Just takes one battle that needs to be won defensively for the defense to win the rep. Offensively, it takes 11. You got to win 11 battles to have a really successful offensive play. And it's hard, I think, for offenses to develop that continuity in the first 7, 8, 9 practices. But what I saw from Alabama this past weekend, I am really encouraged. Start with Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson is in great control. He was accurate. He was extremely decisive. He's getting the ball out. And yes, there were a couple missed throws, but guess what? It's practice 9. Missing a couple throws is to be expected. There were a couple situations where maybe him and the receiver weren't always on the exact same page, but guess what? Those are things that get flushed out as practice continues to move along. And then by scrimmage 2, and then ultimately by the time that you're preparing for your week 1 opponent, those things are really dialed in. Ty Simpson has better mobility than you realize. He's very accurate, and he's in complete control of what this offense needs to be. He doesn't need to be a superhero. He doesn't need to be a guy that's going to go out and win the Heisman Trophy. That's not what's necessary for him to go and put Alabama in position to go win a national championship. He needs to manage the game. He needs to limit the negative plays, and he needs to avoid disasters. And he did that beautifully this past weekend. But what encouraged me even more than Ty Simpson's play was the depth that they have at the position. Austin Mack is a good football player. He's got a live arm. He can drive the ball down the field. He's very accurate. He's got better mobility than you'd realize for a guy that's 6'6". I really liked what I saw from Austin Mack. He's delivering the ball before guys are getting out of breaks. He's throwing into tight windows. There's a lot to be encouraged by with where he was at last year to where he's at right now to even be in position to contend for that starting spot. And then with Keelan Russell, he's got a ton of talent. The ball just jumps off of his hand. It is so impressive to watch him throw the football. And he's got great mobility as well. But learning all the nuances of getting guys lined up, anticipating the snap count, understanding what the defense is trying to do when they're disguising coverage, anticipating pressure and blitz packages, and making sure that your protections are completely dialed in. There's still a little bit of a learning curve there, which is to be expected for a true freshman. So I've been even more encouraged from what I saw from Ty Simpson. I was more encouraged by what I saw from the 2 backups, because those guys, in the event in which Ty has to miss a series or takes a big hit and has to kind of take a moment to kind of gather himself, they have much better depth at that position than I would have ever anticipated. That's a great thing. And the fact that this competition is continuing on is a good thing as well. It tells you the staff has great faith in Ty Simpson, but they also have great faith in the growth and development that they're seeing from their young quarterbacks in Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. So keep an eye on this battle. Would not be surprised if this battle is finished up 1 week from 5 days from now when they finish up scrimmage number 2. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But right now, it certainly appears as though Ty Simpson has a good grasp on the starting job. And I think he's going to be really well positioned to have a nice year as a first-year starting quarterback with that tremendous talent that he has around him for the Crimson Tide offense. We'll move over to one of the biggest threats in the SEC, that's the Georgia Bulldogs. And you're hearing more and more about Georgia's weapons. And we've talked about this a little bit all off season. I don't feel like the upgrades that they've made at receiver have been documented enough. Right now, it's sounding like Noah Thomas, who was a great addition, has great length. It sounds like he is the guy that could become a real go-to guy in the red zone. Sounds like he's a guy that is capable of going up, winning those contested catch situations. He's developing into a real lockdown matchup problem for the Georgia defense. And we know that Georgia defense, especially their cover guys, they can play. They can play at a really, really high level. But the name I continue to hear about is London Humphreys, who was a little bit lost in the shuffle last year. London Humphreys, when he transferred from Vanderbilt to Georgia, I thought there was a real chance for him to find his way on the field. He's a really solid prototypical wide receiver, a lot faster than I think people probably give him credit for, has great feel for the position, willing to go across the middle, can run some of the underneath stuffs, can stretch the field vertically. London Humphreys is the name that's kind of been forgotten about, but I would encourage everybody to remember that name as they get ready to start the season, because I think he could play a huge role in developing the dependability that was lacking last year, because Dylan Bell is a really, really good football player. He's an excellent football player. Remember a couple of years ago, he was a receiver that had to switch to running back because they didn't have enough depth at that position. The guy is outstanding with the ball in his hands. But as far as just the down in, down out consistency, we haven't always gotten that from Dylan Bell. And it sounds like there's still been a couple drops that have happened times this offseason. So hopefully this receiver core as a whole will be in a really good spot to be more consistent than they were a year ago. It also sounds like to me, Zachariah Branch, the transfer from SC, I think he's going to have a huge role in the offense with some of their screens and just get him the ball and let him do work. The guy is explosive. He's dynamic, but it sounds like his impact on the kicking game is going to be massive. Sounds like he had a return touchdown the other day when if he had been allowed to go the distance, he would have. So keep an eye on Zachariah Branch, not only how he impacts the offense, but how he impacts the kicking game as well, the return game with kickoffs and the punt return game there for some hidden yardage that he could create for the Dogs this year. You're also hearing about some depth at running back that is encouraging. We know Nate Frazier is going to be the guy, but it sounds like they're more confident in the guys that could be 2, 3, and 4 than they were maybe a couple months ago or even going into the spring. So encouraging time right now for the Georgia Bulldogs and their improvements at the wide receiver spot, a sore spot from a year ago. We'll go next to the SEC favorites, and that's the Texas Longhorns. The one thing that continues to get talked about when watching this team practice and play is Arch's athleticism. Now, Arch Manning, he showed it last year, right? He showed just how athletic he can be with the quarterback run game. And you wondered, okay, he's your guy now. He's your starter. How much are you going to expose him in the quarterback run game? Well, it sounds like still very much a part of their offensive identity will be incorporating designed quarterback runs. Sounds like he had a 25-yard carry the other day on a designed quarterback run. The other thing too, what's the big question mark that we have about Texas this year? That's their offensive line. The offensive line has a lot of new pieces. They're going against a ridiculously good defensive front, guys that can create their own shot, guys that can rush the passer. We know their defensive line is unbelievable, and you talk to anybody that's watched them this year, sounds like they're living up to expectations here, at least early in fall camp. And like we talked about already, it's not uncommon for the defense to be a little ahead of the offense, especially when the offensive line has so many new faces up there along the front. But it sounds like the offensive line has had their hands full. But you know what can help that offensive line? In the event in which they're not quite operating at full tilt. And guess what? Week 1 against Ohio State has a lot of guys on that defensive line that can cause some significant problems. If that offensive line is challenged at one point or another throughout the season, Arch's athleticism can level out some of the issues that group may have. Because if you're a defensive lineman and you're rushing the quarterback and you're trying to take off the quarterback's head and you're blowing up field at 100 miles an hour, well, guess what? You get pushed past the quarterback. Now that quarterback can take off inside the tackle, get vertical, and create 6, 7, 8, 9 yards with his legs. And on 3rd down and 6, if you have a guy that's capable of taking off and hurting the defense, it makes it a lot more challenging for that defensive line to be able to rush the passer with relentless intensity. So I think Arch's legs, just reminding everybody, we know he can throw it. We know he's accurate. We know he's got a great supporting cast at wide receiver. But do not forget about his ability to challenge opposing defenses with his own athleticism. Whether it's designed quarterback runs or scramble situations, his legs could be a huge difference maker early in the season with an offensive line that's still trying to figure each other out. Move next to another quarterback in the SEC, and it's at LSU. This was the story that caught wildfire last week. Garrett Nussmeier, he has an injury to his knee, and Brian Kelly has to go out to a news conference on Friday with his offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, and tell everybody that no, Garrett Nussmeier did not blow out his knee. He does not have some severe knee injury. He doesn't even have a new knee injury. It sounds like, according to Brian Kelly, that Garrett Nussmeier has chronic tendonitis in his knee and probably just planted the wrong way during Wednesday's practice. Look, this is not something I'm going to panic over. I'm not going to sound the alarm and say, hey, this is a huge issue. This is a major problem. LSU will never be able to bounce back from this. No, that's ludicrous. That's alarmist and unnecessary. But answer me this. Is there another player in college football who's more valuable to their team than Garrett Nussmeier? Because if you really look at things from last year, you look at where they were running the football. They were the worst team in the SEC running the football last year. Very few players in the country have as much weight on their arms and on their shoulders than Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier is out there. LSU is not just a college football playoff contender, but a national championship contender. Garrett Nussmeier at less than 100%. How far does that lead LSU into dropping? So I don't think you need to panic. I don't think you need to be concerned, but it is something worth monitoring, because if he is less than 100%, and by all accounts, it's something that he's been dealing with for a very long time. It sounds like he played with it last year. And Brian Kelly said that this injury is a 1.5 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of severity, which is great. But if for whatever reason, it is problematic and he plants on it the wrong way in the game and he has to miss a quarter, can LSU overcome his absence? That's a legitimate question mark for me. So something worth monitoring, something to be aware of, but not something yet that we need to panic about. Let's do the good news for LSU. Because while there is concern surrounding their quarterback's knee, let's talk about the excitement that we're getting on the defensive side of the football. Because it sounds like, guys, the light has gone on for Harold Perkins. It sounds like last week, in some of the practices that were open to the media and fans, it sounds like Harold Perkins is starting to become that dude that we always thought that he was going to become. Remember, as a freshman, he was an end of the line of scrimmage pass rusher. I mean, he was great, right? That was all he did. And he rushed the passer and he took over games and he beat Arkansas almost single-handedly, right? I think he had 4 sacks in the game. So we all know what he's capable of as a pass rusher. But as a down and down out football player, there was a bit of a disconnect the last couple of years. There were some challenges with him finding the ball, playing off the ball linebacker, being as impactful as he was as a pass rusher there on obvious passing situations on third down. But if you hear about how he kind of flying around right now, how he's actually using some nuance in baiting the opposing quarterback into interceptions, the fact that he's playing some man coverage on tight ends against Des Green, who's 6'7", and it sounds like he's done a great job in coverage. It's sounding like we know he's going to be able to rush the passer. So on third down, you put his hand in the dirt and you let him get after you. We know he can do that. But now in year 2 in Blake Baker's defense, it sounded like he's developing into a real playmaker, which is so encouraging, especially coming off the injury from a year ago. So I think he's more comfortable. I think he's running around making a ton of plays. And the word that I loved most that I heard from Brian Kelly when discussing his progress was the word intentional. Intentional. He's doing things for a reason. He's baiting quarterbacks into interceptions and he's learning how to play the game. That to me is fantastic news when you're thinking about what this defense could develop into. I think this defense could be one of the most improved units in college football. I would not at all be surprised if they are. And part of the reason why I think they can be because they have a handful of players that are as athletic as Harold Perkins. And if he becomes the guy he was always destined to become, look out, he could become an All-American in an instant, assuming he can continue to round into form. Move next to another quarterback battle that's going on right now on Rocky Talk. This is Tennessee's quarterback battle. And I think most of us coming into the fall had just assumed it was going to be Joey Aguilar. We had just assumed that Aguilar, because of how much football he's played, having 2 years as a starter, there at Appalachian State, and then having some JUCO time before that, went to UCLA, was handpicked by the staff to come back when Nico decided to transfer. Sounded like it was going to be his show. Like, all things pointed to him becoming the guy. But it sounds like he's been okay so far this offseason. Sounds like he's been fine, but he hasn't necessarily locked down the position just yet. He's running mostly with the ones, so I still think he's the guy to beat. But as far as just locking this thing down, leaving no doubt, it hasn't sounded like that's happened just yet. What I have heard is that the offensive line's been well above average, which is a great place to start, especially knowing how many pieces are gone and how good I think this defensive line is. But the quarterback spot is what's going to be most important to Tennessee challenging to make the college football playoff yet again. There's three guys in this quarterback competition. You got Aguilar, who we've talked about already, but you also have Jake Merklinger, who got the first stat at times with the first team offense, did have a short touchdown pass. Sounds like his accuracy has been a little up and down. The one guy we have not talked a whole lot about is a guy named George McIntyre, who has been running for the most part with the seconds and the threes. So it's not like he's getting live one-on-one reps all the time and he's just starting to show, man, this is the guy. He's not quite to that point yet. But if you talk to anybody that has watched Tennessee practice, you talk to anybody that has watched Tennessee scrimmage, sounds like they might have a gem in George McIntyre. And while I don't know if he'll be the day one starter by any stretch, the fact that he's in this competition tells you a lot about his makeup, how consistent he is, how accurate he is, and his comfort level right now operating Josh Heupel's offense. So look, he's not the most physically mature guy just yet, but it sounds like the accuracy is something that is really surprising some folks and has been very, very impressive. So keep an eye on this. I still think it'll be Aguilar, but the longer this competition goes, if it goes into the regular season, don't be surprised if at some point this year you see the true freshman George McIntyre, because he's been very, very impressive here in fall camp up to this point. Finally, we will finish things off with a quarterback battle that has been maybe one of the biggest stories of the entire offseason, and that's the quarterback battle that is going on currently at Notre Dame. You listen to people that are really knowledgeable about Notre Dame, their program, and what this battle is currently looking like, and it sounds like right now it's 50-50, where it could be Kenny Minchey one day, CJ Carr the other day, which is a big difference from where we were coming into the fall camp period. I was under the impression it would probably be CJ Carr. I was under the impression that his accuracy, his ability to throw the football down the field, felt like from a passing standpoint, the offense was going to take another step because of how gifted a thrower CJ Carr is. But the problem with CJ Carr is that, like most young quarterbacks, there have been a couple challenges with consistency. There's been a couple bad decisions. There's been a couple interceptions. That is not good when taking things into account. And how has Marcus Freeman won games the last couple years? How has he done it? He's done it with defense and a dynamic rushing attack. He's also done it with a quarterback that knows exactly how he fits into the system. And while Riley Leonard last year wasn't as gifted throwing the football as CJ Carr, he knew how to operate the offense. He knew how to string together first downs. He knew how to pick up that third and short run with a quarterback power, a quarterback sweep. He knew when they got inside the 5, hey, it's my show. I'm going to run this thing into the end zone. I think he had 15 touchdowns as a result. They've won with game management at quarterback. Now, we've seen in the past this Notre Dame offense go out and try to get a big-time starting quarterback. They went a couple years ago and got Sam from Wake Forest, and you thought this passing attack was just the roof was going to fly off and they were going to become this offensive outfit. It didn't work out that way. It was a little up and down that year. And while quarterback play was at times really solid, there are also times when it was just okay based on what our preseason expectations were. But what I'm most encouraged by is that we know Kenny Minchey has been just sitting there waiting in the wings. Let everybody talk about CJ Carr. Let everybody talk about the talent that CJ Carr has, the 5-star pedigree, the coaching pedigree, how he's been taught from he was a 5-year-old kid to become and groomed for this position. There's the little Kenny Minchey over there continuing to grind. He's running a lot with the ones right now. And I think there's a lot to be encouraged by with this development. Now, people I think that have followed recruiting are sitting there saying, oh my gosh, this is a huge issue. Why is this a problem? This to me is a great thing. Competition at the quarterback spot is ideal. Now, in a perfect world, would you love for a guy to lock it down, leave no doubt, and go on to win the Heisman Trophy? Of course. But having competition at the spot is really, really healthy. And it allows you to know even more that in the event in which a guy gets banged up, the next guy, having gone through this competition throughout the fall, is going to be very well positioned to step right in and not skip a beat. But Kenny Minchey right now is making this a very interesting quarterback battle. Remember, week 1 on the road at Miami. What does Miami do really well? They can rush the quarterback. What does Kenny Minchey do really well? He can run the football. So it'll be very, very interesting to see where this thing goes. Because if the mistakes continue to happen the way they've happened for CJ Carr, do not be surprised at all if Kenny Minchey becomes the starting quarterback for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, at least in week 1 against Miami. This will be a fascinating competition to continue to cover. But I think there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that are a little bit traumatized because they think that this is some quarterback battle between Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner. It's not. It's not. This quarterback spot is going to be run by a guy that has really, really high ceiling. Whether that's CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, this is a different layer, a different level that this quarterback position will go to. So if you're concerned because a couple years back you saw the quarterback play, don't worry. It's going to be just fine. Regardless of who it is, they're going to manage the game. They're going to make sure they don't make huge mistakes, and they're still going to win by running the football and playing great defense. That's the bread and butter for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. All right, before we close here, let's dive into some groomers, shall we? If you are unfamiliar and you haven't been following the chaos that is college football coaching searches over the past 10 years, then you know what groomers are. But for those that don't know, Jon Gruden leads 2 groomers. Now, Jon Gruden has been in the NFL forever, right? Coached 15 years, 8 with the Raiders, 7 with the Buccaneers, has over 50% winning percentage, which in the NFL is pretty dang good. Super Bowl champion there in 2012. Well, he says that he would love to become a coach in the SEC, which of course gets the message boards going crazy. Everybody starts thinking about how can we fire our coach so we can get Jon Gruden? Like, the guy has not coached in college football since 1991. He was the wide receivers coach at Pitt. Since 91, he joined the Green Bay Packers as an offensive assistant in 92 and has never been back to college. But the groomers shall remain. We will always be monitoring Jon Gruden and possible openings. And guys, Bill Belichick is now coaching college football. So to say that Jon Gruden will never get an opportunity is absurd. Maybe he will. We'll see what happens, but it will be fascinating to watch because he has been outspoken about his willingness and desire to coach in the Southeastern Conference. Another guy who is a little more familiar amongst college football fans, Jimbo Fisher. And he was on a podcast this past weekend saying he's won 72% of his games, won 80% of his playoff games, been fortunate to have won a national championship as a head coach and as an assistant. He misses the players, he misses the relationships, and he's got a lot of interest in getting back into coaching. Fascinating. My question with Jimbo Fisher is, would he be open to maybe becoming an offensive coordinator? Would somebody want Jimbo Fisher to be an offensive coordinator? Because after the way things ended in College Station, is he going to be in line to take a big-time college football job? Is he desirable? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think he's won a lot of games. I think he's a good coach. But I would be curious, would he take the route that Gus Malzahn has taken, that Chip Kelly has taken, the willingness to go coach offense, call plays offensively? Is that something he'd be open to? Because if he would, I think he'd have that opportunity. But if he doesn't, will he be a possible candidate for a job opening of a Power 4 school at some point in the future? I don't know. We'll be curious. But in fact, Jon Gruden and Jimbo Fisher both trying to get into coaching again. Man, I'm all about this. I love rumor mill, especially as we get ready to kick off the college football season. So for all of us here at ACF, to continue to encourage all of you guys, if you could, like I said, in the preamble at the beginning of the show, told you that our ratings have been sabotaged in the past. So we really need y'all to leave us a rating on the podcast platform that you use. It really would help our show. We appreciate you guys very much. Build our numbers back up, because we were a 5-star show for a very long time. And then we fell off because we clearly are on the committee and we are 100% trying to just ruin seasons. It's definitely what we're trying to do here. We try to celebrate the sport. We know you guys know that. So if you could leave us a rating, it'd mean a lot. We also encourage you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast. And for those of you that are here with us on the ESPN College Football YouTube page, go ahead and subscribe that too. We have a bunch of fun stuff that will be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. Just 12 days away, ladies and gentlemen, 12 days away from a kickoff game in Dublin between Iowa State and Kansas State. We are so close. We are so excited, and we know you guys are as well. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.